Before the first light reaches the mountains, the world of the samurai is almost completely hidden beneath darkness. The great castle that will later dominate the landscape is only a faint shape against the night sky, its tiled roofs barely visible above the walls, while the surrounding town rests quietly beneath the deep shadows of the surrounding hills. A gentle rain has passed through during the night, leaving the wooden roofs dark and shining, the stone paths wet, and the gardens covered with tiny drops of water. Beyond the castle, a river moves steadily through the valley, carrying water down from the mountains toward distant lowlands and eventually toward the sea. There is no electric light, no traffic, no glowing city beyond the horizon. Instead, there are only a few small lanterns, the occasional glow of a charcoal fire, the sound of water moving through the darkness, and the quiet breathing of people who have not yet begun another day. This is the hidden world of the samurai before dawn, a world very different from the dramatic image that has survived in popular imagination. When we think of samurai, we often picture warriors in armor, swords at their sides, standing beneath castle towers or preparing for battle. Yet warfare was only one part of their existence, and for many samurai, especially during the long, peaceful periods of Japanese history, most days contained no battlefield at all. Their lives were filled with administration, family responsibilities, education, travel, household management, cultural traditions, farming, craftsmanship, religious practices, and countless ordinary tasks that rarely appear in the stories told about them. Before dawn, when the castle is silent and the roads are almost empty, it becomes easier to imagine this quieter side of their world. Inside a samurai residence, the night is slowly approaching its final hours. The rooms are simple compared with modern interiors, and their appearance can change according to the time of day. A room that served as a sitting or working space during daylight can become a sleeping room after the bedding is brought out. Futons rest upon tatami floors, carefully arranged beneath the wooden structure of the house. A small lamp may still provide a faint glow in one corner, although most of the household has already gone to sleep. The architecture allows the sounds of the outside world to remain close. Rain can be heard striking the roof. Wind can move through bamboo and trees in the garden. Water can drip from the eaves. Somewhere beyond the residence, a temple bell may sound faintly through the darkness. These sounds do not feel separate from the house. They are part of the environment in which the household exists. In a world without modern heating, cooling, electric lighting, and mechanical noise, weather and nature were much more noticeable. A cold winter night could be felt directly through the structure of the house. A summer evening brought humidity and insects. A storm could alter travel plans and make rivers dangerous. Rain could turn roads into mud and fields into mirrors. The natural world was not something observed from a distance. It shaped daily decisions. The person sleeping inside this residence might belong to a samurai family, but that does not necessarily mean they spend their life preparing for combat. Depending on the period, rank, location, and circumstances, a samurai might be an administrator, government official, teacher, land manager, military officer, scholar, or household head. During periods of peace, especially under the Tokugawa shogunate, many samurai became deeply involved in bureaucratic and administrative work. Their ability to read and write became increasingly important. Documents had to be prepared, records maintained, taxes assessed, property managed, correspondence exchanged, and official instructions communicated. The sword remained a powerful symbol of samurai identity, but the brush could be just as important in everyday life. A low writing desk might stand in a quiet room, with paper, an inkstone, and brushes carefully arranged nearby. When morning finally comes, the person who sleeps there may spend several hours reading documents rather than drawing a sword. This is one of the great differences between the historical samurai and the simplified warrior image that later generations created. The samurai world was not permanently frozen in a state of war. It changed dramatically across centuries, and during long periods of stability, the skills required for administration and cultural life became increasingly important. Outside the residence, the castle itself is beginning to emerge from the darkness. Japanese castles were not simply giant homes for powerful lords. They were complex centers of defense, government, storage, administration, and social organization. Their walls, gates, moats, towers, courtyards, storehouses, and residences were connected to one another in carefully planned ways. The castle stood at the center of a much larger settlement, and its existence depended upon everything around it. Farmers produced food in the surrounding countryside. Craftsmen built and repaired structures. Merchants supplied goods. Stable workers cared for horses. Gardeners maintained plants and paths. Servants prepared meals and carried water. Guards protected entrances. Clerks and officials handled documents. Carpenters repaired buildings. Without all of these people, the castle could not function. The magnificent structure visible from a distance was therefore only the outer layer of a much larger living system. Before dawn, most of that system is still hidden. The kitchens are quiet, the workshops are closed, and the courtyards are empty. But soon the first signs of movement will begin. Someone will light a fire. Someone will prepare water. Someone will open a shutter. Someone will begin sweeping a veranda. Another person will check the animals. A guard will complete a watch. The castle will slowly transform from a sleeping structure into a working community. Beyond the castle walls, the surrounding town is equally quiet. Wooden houses line narrow streets, their roofs designed to protect the interiors from the frequent rain. Drainage channels carry water away from buildings, and bridges cross small streams that connect different parts of the settlement. The streets are not perfectly straight or uniform. They follow the terrain and the practical needs of the community. During the day, merchants will open their shops, craftsmen will begin their work, and people from surrounding villages will arrive with food and other goods. But before dawn, the streets belong almost entirely to darkness and weather. The rain has left small pools along the stones, and water continues dripping from the edges of roofs. Somewhere in the distance, a horse moves inside a stable. Somewhere else, a dog may bark briefly before becoming quiet again. The town seems almost empty, but it is only waiting for morning. Beyond the town are the rice fields, forests, rivers and mountains that support the entire community. These landscapes can look peaceful from a castle tower, but they represent enormous amounts of labor. Rice cultivation requires irrigation, planting, maintenance, harvesting, storage, and transportation. Water must be controlled carefully. Embankments need repair. Fields must be protected from flooding. Roads must connect villages with markets. Forests provide timber and fuel. Rivers provide water and transportation, but can also become dangerous during heavy rainfall. The beauty of the countryside, therefore, hides a complicated network of human work. A samurai administrator looking across the valley is not simply looking at a beautiful landscape. He is looking at the economic foundation of the domain, at fields that provide resources, roads that connect communities, rivers that must be managed, and villages whose productivity supports the political system. And still, before dawn, all of this is quiet. The rice fields lie beneath the darkness. The mountains are invisible except for their faint silhouettes. The river continues moving without interruption. The castle walls remain still. A thin mist may hover above the water. Rainwater falls gently from the leaves. Somewhere inside a house, a person turns beneath a blanket. Somewhere inside the castle, a guard listens to the night. No battle is taking place. No famous decision is being made. No dramatic event is occurring. Yet this quiet moment is part of history just as much as any famous battle or political change. Most people who lived in the samurai era experienced countless ordinary nights like this one. They slept, woke, worked, ate, traveled, raised families, repaired their homes, cared for animals, maintained their possessions, watched the seasons change, and eventually passed their lives to the next generation. The extraordinary events that we remember were surrounded by an enormous amount of ordinary life. Before the sun rises over the mountains, we are standing inside that forgotten space, listening to the rain on the roof and watching the first faint signs of morning begin to appear. As the darkness begins to thin, the first changes are almost impossible to notice. The sky above the mountains shifts from black toward a deep gray, and the outlines of the trees slowly separate from one another. The castle roofs become clearer, their curved tiles still wet from the night's rain. Water continues to fall from the edges of the eaves, landing softly on stone and wood below. Inside the residences, people begin to stir. The first person awake may be someone whose work has little to do with the samurai himself. A servant tending the kitchen, a stable worker checking the horses, a guard completing the last part of the night watch, or someone responsible for preparing water. The great castle may belong to a lord, but its morning begins because ordinary people begin working. A fire is carefully brought back to life. Charcoal glows beneath a layer of ash, then brightens as fresh fuel is added. Soon there is a small warmth in the kitchen, and the first signs of cooking begin. Water is heated. Rice is prepared. Bowls and utensils are arranged. Outside, the rain has almost stopped, but drops still fall from the branches. The smell of smoke slowly joins the smell of wet earth and wood. This is how the great political world of the samurai begins each day, not with a sword being drawn, but with a fire being lit. The kitchen reveals a side of historical life that is rarely shown in stories about warriors. Food was one of the central concerns of every household, and preparing it required time, knowledge, fuel, water, and labor. Rice was especially important, but meals varied greatly depending on region, season, wealth, and availability. Vegetables, fish, tofu, seaweed, pickled foods, soups, and other ingredients could appear in different combinations. Wealthier households had access to a greater variety of foods, while poorer families relied more heavily on local staples. There was no single meal that could be called the samurai meal, just as there was no single kind of samurai life. The person preparing breakfast might have been awake long before the samurai himself, measuring rice, carrying water, managing the fire, and arranging the meal. In a large household, several people could be involved in this process. The kitchen was therefore a place where the economic structure of the wider community became visible. The rice came from fields, vegetables came from farms and gardens, fish came from rivers or the sea. Salt, ceramics, fuel, and other supplies moved through markets and roads. A simple bowl of food connected the castle to an enormous network of people and landscapes. As the household becomes more active, the sleeping rooms begin to change as well. Bedding is folded and put away, returning the tatami room to another purpose. A low table may be brought into the space. Clothing is prepared. The samurai's formal appearance matters because clothing communicates social position. The garments worn by a warrior vary according to period, status, activity, and occasion, and the elaborate armor associated with samurai imagery would not have been worn during ordinary household routines. Armor was specialized equipment, often expensive and carefully maintained. Everyday clothing was much more practical. A samurai might dress for administrative work, travel, training, or a formal meeting, depending on the day's responsibilities. The sword, however, remained an important symbol of identity in later periods, even when its practical use was rare. It required care, particularly in a damp climate. Moisture could damage metal and other materials, so weapons and equipment had to be cleaned, protected, and stored properly. A sword resting quietly in a room therefore represented not constant warfare, but readiness, status, tradition, and the responsibility associated with belonging to the warrior class. The morning routine also reveals the importance of education. A young samurai did not simply grow up learning how to fight. Depending on the period and household, education could include reading, writing, classical literature, moral philosophy, history, mathematics, military traditions, and practical administration. The increasing importance of bureaucratic government during peaceful periods made literacy particularly valuable. A samurai who could read and write could manage records, correspondence, reports, property documents, and official instructions. A quiet writing room might therefore be as important to the household as a training yard. Inside, an inkstone would be prepared, a brush carefully held, and paper placed on a low desk. The physical act of writing was slow compared with modern communication. Ink had to be prepared. The brush had to be controlled. Characters had to be formed carefully. A letter could take time to compose and even longer to reach its destination. Yet written communication connected households and political centers across considerable distances. A document leaving the castle in the morning might travel by messenger along roads and mountain passes before reaching another town. Those roads were themselves part of the hidden infrastructure of samurai society. A castle could not function in isolation. It depended upon roads that carried food, materials, officials, travelers, and information. In the countryside, roads followed valleys, crossed bridges, climbed slopes, and passed through villages. During dry weather, they could be relatively easy to travel, but rain transformed them. Mud gathered in low areas. Streams rose. Wooden bridges became slippery. Mountain paths could become difficult or dangerous. Travelers therefore paid close attention to weather and local conditions. A journey that seems short on a modern map could take much longer when traveling on foot or by horse over uneven terrain. Post stations and inns along important routes provided places where travelers could rest, eat, change horses, and receive information. A samurai traveling between administrative centers might therefore experience a very different world from the one inside his own castle residence. The road also carried stories. In a world without telephones, radio, television, or instant messages, people themselves were among the most important carriers of information. A merchant arriving from another town might bring news of prices, weather, festivals, political changes, or unusual events. A traveler might tell stories heard at an inn. A messenger could carry official instructions. A pilgrim might describe a distant temple. Information moved at the speed of human travel, which meant that the world felt much larger. A person living in one castle town could be deeply familiar with the surrounding villages and mountains, while knowing distant regions mainly through books and travelers' accounts. This local scale of knowledge created a very different relationship with distance. A mountain range was not just something visible on a map, it was a physical barrier. A river was not simply a blue line, it had to be crossed. A distant city was not a short journey by car or train. It required time, preparation, money, and sometimes considerable risk. Back at the castle, the first gates of the day begin to open. Guards check movement through entrances, and the courtyards slowly fill with people. Workers carry supplies. Horses are led from their stalls. Officials begin moving toward their offices. The castle's formal spaces become active while its hidden spaces remain busy with maintenance. A building of this size requires constant care. Wooden surfaces must be cleaned. Roofs need inspection. Drainage channels have to remain clear. Gardens require pruning and sweeping. Storage rooms need organization. Paper screens tear and must be repaired. Clothing wears out. Tools break. Nothing simply remains perfect because it is inside a castle. The appearance of order depends upon continuous labor. This maintenance is one of the most overlooked aspects of historical architecture. When we visit an old castle today, we may see polished floors, preserved walls, carefully arranged gardens, and restored structures and imagined that they always looked that way. In reality, historical buildings were constantly changing. Roof tiles were replaced, wooden beams could be repaired, walls could be rebuilt. Gardens were trimmed and altered, paths were repaired, objects were cleaned and restored. A castle survived because generations of people worked to keep it functioning. Even the most impressive stone walls were affected by weather. Rain darkened the surface. Moss appeared in shaded places. Roots could grow nearby. Stones shifted over time. Human beings were always responding to the slow pressure of nature. The same principle applied to household objects. A ceramic bowl might become valuable because it survived for generations, but survival required care. Wooden boxes could be repaired. Clothing could be patched. Lacquered objects could be restored. A treasured sword could be passed from one generation to another. These objects accumulated history through use. Their value was not always connected to being new. In some cases, age and association made an object more meaningful. The household, therefore, existed within a culture where objects could carry memories of previous generations. A sword might have belonged to a grandfather. A writing box might have been inherited. A tea bowl might have been used by several generations of the same family. The garden outside the residence carries a similar sense of continuity. It is wet after the night's rain, and the stones appear darker than usual. Moss has absorbed water. Leaves hang heavily from branches. A small pond reflects the pale sky. The garden may look natural, but it is also carefully designed and maintained. Paths are placed deliberately. Stones create visual balance. Trees are pruned. Water is guided. Bridges create transitions. The garden is not simply a piece of untouched wilderness. It is a human interpretation of nature. Yet nature is always changing the garden in return. Trees grow. Leaves fall. Moss spreads. Rain reshapes small channels. Seasons transform the colors. The gardener can guide the landscape but never completely control it. This balance between control and change appears throughout the samurai world. A castle wall provides protection, but earthquakes and weather can damage it. A field can be carefully cultivated, but a flood can destroy the harvest. A road can be maintained, but a storm can wash it away. A political system can provide stability, but future generations may change it. A family can preserve traditions, but children may experience the world differently. The people living within this system could plan carefully, but they could never completely control what would happen. The mountains outside the castle provide a constant reminder of this limitation. They rise above the town regardless of political authority. Their forests supply wood, their streams provide water, and their slopes shape the routes people must travel. During clear weather they may appear close and sharply defined. During rain they disappear behind mist. A person living in the valley would have seen them in countless different conditions throughout a lifetime. Sometimes snow covered the highest peaks. Sometimes clouds hid everything. Sometimes the autumn forests became bright with changing leaves. Sometimes summer humidity softened the entire landscape. The mountains were both scenery and infrastructure, shaping agriculture, travel, weather, and local identity. The river below is equally important. After the night's rain, it carries more water than it did yesterday. The current moves steadily around stones and beneath a wooden bridge. Small branches and leaves travel downstream. The river is beautiful, but everyone who lives nearby understands its power. Heavy rain upstream can raise the water level. A flood can damage fields, roads, and houses. Communities therefore develop practical knowledge about water. They know where the river rises first, where the banks are strong, which bridges are safe, and which low areas should be avoided. The river becomes part of local memory. People remember previous floods and use that knowledge to prepare for future ones. From the castle, this entire landscape might appear peaceful and almost effortless. Yet every field, road, bridge, and channel represents work. The beauty of the valley is partly the result of human organization. Agriculture has shaped the land. Roads have been constructed through forests. Villages have grown around water sources. Bridges connect communities. The castle sits above all of it as a visible symbol of political authority, but its existence depends upon the landscape below. The samurai may have carried swords, but the strength of their society ultimately rested upon farmers, craftsmen, merchants, builders, servants, and countless other people whose names were rarely preserved. By mid-morning, the quiet before dawn has completely disappeared. The town is awake now. Yet if we move slowly through the castle and surrounding streets, we can still feel the atmosphere left behind by the rain. Water drips from shaded roofs. The garden remains cool. The river continues flowing. The mountains are still partly covered in mist. The ordinary world has begun another day, and somewhere within it, a samurai begins his own responsibilities, not knowing which parts of his life will eventually be remembered and which will disappear completely. Most likely, the majority will disappear. The meals, conversations, walks, letters, small worries, moments of tiredness, and quiet evenings will vanish with the people who experienced them. What remains are fragments, buildings, objects, documents, landscapes, and stories. Yet those fragments are enough to remind us that behind every famous historical figure was an ordinary human life, and behind every great castle was a world of people waking before dawn, lighting fires, preparing food, listening to rain, and beginning another day. By late morning, the castle town has fully awakened, and the quiet atmosphere of the hours before sunrise has been replaced by the steady rhythm of work. The narrow streets are now filled with movement, although the pace remains much slower than anything familiar to a modern city. Wooden shutters have been opened, shop entrances swept, carts moved into position, and goods arranged beneath deep roofs that protect them from the changing weather. Merchants prepare rice, vegetables, cloth, pottery, tools, and other necessities for customers who will arrive throughout the day. Craftsmen begin working in workshops that may have belonged to the same family for generations, using tools and techniques learned through long apprenticeships. Farmers from nearby villages enter the town carrying produce, while messengers and officials move toward the castle. Horses are led carefully through the streets, their hooves striking wet stones left dark by the morning rain. Somewhere, a blacksmith has begun striking heated metal, and the repeated sound of hammer against anvil carries through the neighborhood. Somewhere else, a carpenter is shaping wood, creating a completely different rhythm. The town is now alive, but its activity is not chaotic. Each person has a place, each task has its time, and the entire settlement functions through countless routines that have been repeated for years. The samurai moving through this town would have been surrounded by people whose lives were connected to his own, even when their formal social positions were very different. A merchant might supply goods needed by his household. A craftsman might repair an object used by his family. A farmer might produce the rice that became part of his daily meals. A stable worker might care for his horse. A servant might prepare his clothing. A clerk might record his financial obligations. The apparent independence of the warrior was therefore an illusion. The samurai class depended upon a vast economic network, and that network depended upon the labor of people who were often excluded from the heroic stories of the period. When we imagine a castle from a distance, we see walls and towers, but inside those walls existed a web of relationships that made the entire structure possible. The samurai could exercise political authority, but he still needed food, clothing, tools, buildings, transportation, information, and labor. The castle was a center of power, but it was also a consumer of the surrounding economy. Among the most important people in this system were craftsmen. The production of everyday objects required considerable skill. A wooden bowl might appear simple, but producing it required knowledge of wood, tools, drying, shaping, and finishing. A lacquered box could involve multiple stages of preparation and polishing. Textiles required spinning, weaving, dyeing, and sewing. Pottery depended upon clay, shaping, glazing or surface treatment, and firing. Metal tools required knowledge of heat and hammering. The craftsman therefore possessed a form of specialized knowledge that could take years to develop. Much of this knowledge was transmitted through apprenticeship, where younger workers learned by watching and repeating the actions of experienced masters. The process was slow because mastery was slow. There was no shortcut around years of practice. This emphasis on repetition existed throughout samurai culture. Martial arts required repeated movements until techniques became controlled and familiar. Calligraphy required repeated brush strokes. Tea preparation required repeated gestures. Gardening required repeated pruning and maintenance. Carpentry required repeated cuts and measurements. In every case, skill came from doing something many times. The idea of discipline therefore extended beyond the battlefield. It was part of the wider culture of craftsmanship and education. A person became capable by practicing until the movements no longer required constant conscious thought. The result could appear effortless, but the effort was hidden in the years that came before. The sword is perhaps the most famous example of this hidden craftsmanship. A samurai sword was not created by a single moment of forging. Different specialists could be involved in creating and maintaining the blade, mounting, scabbard, fittings, and other components. The blade required careful forging and later polishing. The wooden scabbard needed to fit precisely. The handle had to be assembled and wrapped. Decorative fittings could involve additional metalworking skills. Maintenance continued throughout the sword's life. Moisture had to be controlled, surfaces inspected, and components repaired when necessary. A sword displayed today as a single beautiful object is therefore the final result of many hands and many stages of work. During the samurai period, the weapon could carry practical importance, social meaning, family history, and artistic value all at once. Yet the same household that carefully maintained a sword also had to maintain much less glamorous objects. Cooking vessels broke, roofs leaked, sandals wore out, baskets needed repair, wooden doors warped, paper screens tore, tools became dull, clothing required stitching. These ordinary problems occupied people's time constantly. Historical households did not live in perfectly preserved environments. Everything was subject to wear. Rain, humidity, insects, fire, and repeated use affected materials. Maintenance was therefore one of the central activities of daily life. The elegance associated with traditional Japanese architecture was possible partly because people continually cleaned, repaired, replaced, and cared for its materials. Wood was particularly important because it formed the structure of so many buildings. Japan's forests provided enormous quantities of timber, and traditional carpentry developed sophisticated methods for working with it. Wooden components could be joined with carefully shaped connections rather than relying entirely on metal fasteners. This allowed buildings to respond to movement and changes in humidity. Roofs extended outward to protect walls from rain. Raised floors helped with ventilation. Open transitional spaces connected interiors with gardens. Architecture responded to the environment rather than trying to completely isolate people from it. On a rainy day, the design of a traditional residence becomes especially understandable. The deep roof protects the veranda. The garden remains visible beyond the sheltered edge. Water is guided away from the structure. The house feels connected to the weather while still providing protection from it. This relationship between inside and outside shaped the emotional atmosphere of the home. A person sitting inside could hear rain without getting wet. They could smell the garden after rainfall. They could watch water collect in a pond. They could see mist moving through trees. The garden was not simply decoration outside a building. It was part of the interior experience. The architecture framed it, and daily life incorporated it. During different seasons, the same room offered a different view. Spring brought blossoms. Summer brought thick greenery. Autumn brought changing leaves. Winter exposed branches and sometimes snow. Rain added another layer of movement and sound. The garden also provided a place where time became visible. A tree planted decades earlier could become enormous. A stone path could become worn by generations of footsteps. Moss could spread across shaded surfaces. A pond could accumulate leaves and change subtly over the years. People cared for these spaces, but they also accepted gradual change. This combination of control and impermanence became one of the most recognizable characteristics of Japanese aesthetic traditions. A garden was carefully composed, yet it was never completely fixed. nature continued working upon it. This awareness of change was also present in religious thought and literature. Buddhist traditions in Japan emphasized impermanence in various ways, while Shinto practices connected communities to particular places, natural features, and ancestral traditions. These religious systems were complex and often intertwined rather than existing as completely separate categories. Temples and shrines could become important parts of local communities, and samurai families could maintain relationships with religious institutions. A temple might serve not only as a place of worship, but also as a center for education, family memorials, art, and community activity. A shrine might be associated with local identity and seasonal festivals. The religious landscape therefore formed another layer of the castle town. A temple after rainfall could be one of the quietest places in the region. Stone steps remain wet beneath the trees. Moss grows around the base of old monuments. Water collects along the edges of paths. Wooden buildings stand beneath large tiled roofs. A bell hangs quietly in its tower. The garden is almost empty. The atmosphere is not necessarily dramatic. It is simply still. A person walking through such a place could become aware of small sounds that disappear during the busier hours of the day. Water dripping from leaves, wind moving through branches, the distant river, a wooden door closing, perhaps the faint sound of someone sweeping a path. Sweeping is itself an interesting example of repetition. A path can be swept in the morning and covered with leaves again by afternoon, yet someone sweeps it again. The action may seem pointless if viewed from a distance because nature immediately begins undoing the work, but the repetition is part of maintaining the space. The garden does not need to remain permanently perfect. It needs to be cared for each day. This is true of many aspects of historical life. Cleaning, repairing, preparing, and maintaining do not permanently solve problems. They simply keep the household functioning. The same principle applies to agriculture. A field must be prepared repeatedly. A crop must be planted again after each harvest. Irrigation channels must be cleared. Tools must be maintained. Storage facilities must be checked. The work never reaches a permanent conclusion. Each year begins another cycle. Farmers therefore lived according to rhythms that were older than any individual political system. Even when rulers changed, the agricultural calendar continued. Spring brought preparation, summer growth, autumn harvest, and winter a different set of tasks. The samurai administration existed above this cycle, but it depended upon it. Rice was particularly important to the political economy because agricultural production was closely connected to taxation and wealth. A domain's productive capacity could be measured in rice terms, and samurai stipends were often connected to these agricultural resources. This meant that the countryside was not simply a picturesque background to castle life. It was the economic foundation of political power. Officials needed information about harvests, land, irrigation, and local conditions. Poor harvests could create serious problems. Floods or droughts could affect entire communities. The relationship between the castle and the fields was therefore direct. This economic dependence also reveals another side of samurai authority. Political power required administration. A lord could issue orders, but those orders had to be communicated and implemented. Records had to be kept. Officials needed to travel. Taxes had to be collected. Disputes had to be resolved. Construction projects required labor and materials. Roads and bridges needed maintenance. The warrior class therefore developed a substantial administrative culture, particularly during peaceful periods. The samurai who spent his morning writing documents might appear far removed from the battlefield, but his work was part of the system that allowed the domain to function. Inside an administrative room, the atmosphere could be very different from the noisy streets. Paper documents would be stacked carefully. Brushes and inkstones would be arranged. Low desks provided working surfaces. Officials might sit for long periods reading and writing. A document could contain information about land, taxes, appointments, or household matters. A seal might authenticate it. Messages would be copied and distributed. The process could be slow, but written records created continuity. Decisions could be preserved and referred to later. In a society where oral communication remained important, writing provided another layer of organization. Education prepared people for this work. Samurai children could begin learning at a young age, with instruction shaped by family expectations and local institutions. Reading and writing were important, but education could also include moral teachings, history, literature, military knowledge, and practical skills. The content varied by period and household, and not every samurai received the same education, but literacy became an increasingly important part of elite life. The image of the samurai as a warrior holding a sword, therefore, needs to be expanded to include the scholar, clerk, teacher, and administrator. This transformation was particularly visible during the long peace of the Edo period. Generations could grow up without experiencing major warfare directly. The memory of earlier conflicts remained important, and military traditions continued, but daily life became increasingly organized around peaceful administration and urban culture. Castle towns expanded. Commercial activity increased. Publishing and entertainment developed. Samurai households adapted to a society where their traditional military identity remained important, while their practical responsibilities increasingly involved governance. This created an unusual social world. A person could belong to a warrior class and spend much of their life performing bureaucratic work. A castle could remain a military symbol while functioning primarily as an administrative center. A sword could be worn as a sign of status, even when its practical use was rare. Traditional warrior ideals could coexist with literature, tea, theater, commerce, and urban life. The samurai world was therefore not one-dimensional. As afternoon approaches, the castle town continues its rhythm. The sun has dried many of the wet surfaces left by the morning rain, although shaded paths remain damp. The mountains are clearer now. Smoke rises from distant houses. The river shines in the sunlight. People continue moving through the streets, but the urgency of the morning has softened. A craftsman pauses to inspect a finished object. A merchant speaks with a customer. A horse rests after being led through the town. Somewhere inside the castle, an official finishes a document and places it among others. In a garden, a worker trims a branch. Nothing remarkable happens, and that is exactly what makes the moment useful for understanding the past. History often teaches us to look for turning points, but daily life contains very few of them. Most days are made of continuation. The same tasks are repeated. The same roads are walked. The same meals are prepared. The same buildings are maintained. The same rivers flow. A person may spend an entire afternoon doing something that will never appear in a historical record. Yet that afternoon is part of the total experience of the age. The samurai era was not made only by the people whose names survived. It was built by everyone who participated in its daily routines. By evening, the light will begin to fade again, and the town will slowly return to the atmosphere of the previous night. Lanterns will appear. Kitchens will become active. Doors will close. Families will gather. Guards will take their positions. The castle will become quiet. And somewhere beyond the walls, the river will continue flowing beneath the darkening mountains. The cycle will repeat, just as it has repeated for generations. The people living within it may not think of themselves as part of history. They are simply living. Yet centuries later, when we look back at their castles, gardens, roads, tools, and landscapes, it is this ordinary rhythm that we are trying to recover. The slow movement of a day, the changing light, the work of countless hands, and the quiet lives that existed between the famous events. As evening approaches, the castle town begins a gradual transformation. The busy sounds of the afternoon become softer. Workshops begin to close. Merchants organize the goods that will remain inside their shops overnight, and people start making their way back toward their homes. The sunlight that had illuminated the mountains now reaches them at a lower angle, turning the distant slopes into layers of muted green and blue. The castle roofs catch the final light of the day, while the lower courtyards begin to fall into shadow. Along the streets, the smell of cooking fires becomes stronger as households prepare evening meals. The town does not suddenly become silent. Instead, it sounds slowly separate into smaller pockets of activity. A wooden door closes here, a cart moves there, a horse is led toward a stable, and somewhere a temple bell marks the changing hour. The day has not ended, but its public energy is beginning to retreat. For the people living in the castle town, evening was an important transition between public and private life. During daylight, the streets and administrative buildings connected people to the wider community. At night, the household became more important. Samurai returned from official duties, craftsmen finished their work, merchants secured their shops, and families gathered inside their homes. This change was closely connected to the absence of modern artificial lighting. A town could not simply remain brightly illuminated after sunset. Oil lamps, candles, and lanterns provided light, but they were limited resources and created relatively small areas of illumination. Beyond the warm circle of a lantern, darkness remained. A familiar street could become difficult to navigate. and a garden that seemed simple during daylight could become a landscape of shadows and sounds. The limited nature of artificial light affected the rhythm of the entire society. Daylight was valuable because it allowed people to work, travel, read, cultivate fields, and move through the landscape more easily. As darkness approached, many activities naturally slowed down. This does not mean that everyone went to sleep immediately after sunset. Guards remained awake, travelers continued along roads, religious activities took place, and households could continue working by lamplight. But the night was fundamentally different from the day. Darkness changed what people could see, where they could go, and how much energy they were likely to spend. The natural cycle of the sun, therefore, remained a powerful influence on daily life. Inside the samurai residence, evening preparations would begin with practical tasks. Clothing used during the day might be removed and carefully folded. Objects that had been used for work would be stored. A sword might be placed in its usual location. Documents would be put away. The room could then be rearranged for eating or resting. The simplicity of traditional Japanese interiors made this possible. A room did not need to be permanently dedicated to one activity. The same space could serve as a study during the day, a dining area in the evening, and a sleeping room at night. Bedding could be folded away in storage during daylight and brought out again after dark. Low tables could be moved when needed. Screens could alter the division of space. The house changed according to the activities of the people inside it. This flexibility was especially useful because space itself was valuable. A household did not need separate rooms for every function. Instead, objects and arrangements transformed the same room. The architecture was deliberately restrained, and the garden outside became part of the visual experience. During the day, natural light moved through the rooms and changed the appearance of the interior. At night, a small lamp created a completely different atmosphere. The warm glow of a flame illuminated only part of the room, leaving the rest in soft shadow. Wooden surfaces reflected the light gently. Paper screens became translucent. The garden beyond them almost disappeared. The kitchen, meanwhile, remained one of the warmest parts of the house. Fire was essential for cooking, heating water, and sometimes providing warmth during colder seasons. But fire was also dangerous. Many traditional buildings were constructed largely from wood, and dense towns could be vulnerable to large fires. A small flame had to be controlled carefully. Charcoal and other fuels had to be stored safely. Water had to be available. People needed practical knowledge of fire prevention. A household could depend upon fire every day, while also understanding how quickly it could become destructive. This dual nature of fire was a constant reality in a wooden society. The same duality existed with water. Rivers and irrigation channels supported life, but floods could destroy it. Rain filled reservoirs and fields, but excessive rain could damage roads and buildings. The moat around a castle could provide defense, but the same water reflected the architecture and became part of the landscape. Water was never simply one thing. It could be resource, transportation route, boundary, danger, decoration, and sound. After rainfall, the evening landscape revealed this especially clearly. Water remained in the garden pond. Small streams moved beneath bridges. Drops continued falling from branches. The river carried the day's rain toward the lowlands. The castle moat reflected the darkening sky. The streets were still damp beneath the fading light. The entire town seemed connected by water. A person walking home could hear it in several forms without consciously noticing. Rainwater falling from a roof, a stream beneath a bridge, the distant river, and the occasional drip from a tree. These sounds formed part of the natural soundtrack of the samurai world. There were no engines, refrigerators, air conditioners, or electric transformers filling the background. This does not mean the world was completely silent. Quite the opposite. Human activity created many sounds, but they were different. Wood creaked, horses moved, metal struck metal, bells sounded, footsteps crossed floors, tools struck materials, water flowed. Birds and insects filled the natural spaces. Wind moved through trees. At night, when human activity decreased, these natural sounds became more noticeable. A person lying awake in a traditional room could therefore experience the world through sound. They might not see the garden, but they could hear rain falling into the pond. They might not see the river, but they could hear its distant movement. They might not see the trees, but they could hear branches moving in the wind. Darkness reduced the visual world, but enlarged the importance of hearing. This was particularly important for guards. A castle could not rely only on walls and gates. People had to watch and listen. At night, visibility was limited, and unusual sounds could become significant. A guard might hear footsteps approaching a gate, a horse moving unexpectedly, a door opening, or some other activity. Most nights would probably pass without incident, but the possibility of something unusual meant that attention remained part of the job. Guard duty was repetitive and often uneventful, but its very purpose depended upon someone remaining awake while others slept. The presence of guards also reminds us that peace did not eliminate the military character of the samurai world. Even during long periods without major warfare, castles retained defensive features, weapons were maintained, and warrior status remained politically important. A peaceful castle was still a castle. Moats, walls, gates, towers, and controlled entrances reflected an older world in which political authority could be challenged by force. The absence of battle did not erase the possibility of conflict. Instead, military power became part of the structure that supported political stability. During the Edo period, this stability allowed many samurai to live lives that were much more administrative than military. Their identity remained connected to the warrior class, but their daily work could involve records, law, education, finance, and government. This created an unusual combination of martial tradition and bureaucratic life. A person might wear a sword while spending most of the day writing documents. A castle might contain an armory while also functioning as a government office. A samurai household might have martial training equipment alongside books, calligraphy tools, and tea utensils. The evening, therefore, could bring together many aspects of this culture. After finishing official duties, a samurai might return to a quiet room, review correspondence, read, speak with family members, or participate in a cultural activity. Tea could be prepared, a poem might be discussed, a child might practice writing, a guest could arrive. These activities were not necessarily separate from the warrior identity. They were part of the broader cultural world that developed around the samurai class. Tea, in particular, illustrates the relationship between discipline and simplicity. Preparing and serving tea involved controlled movements and attention to detail. The room could be small and quiet, with carefully chosen objects reflecting the season. A simple flower arrangement might sit in an alcove. The bowl could have an irregular shape that was valued precisely because it was not perfectly uniform. The experience emphasized the immediate moment. Rain outside could become part of the atmosphere rather than an inconvenience. Imagine such a room at the end of a rainy day. The charcoal fire glows softly. Steam rises from the kettle. The wooden walls are warm in the lamplight. Outside, drops fall from the roof. The garden is almost completely dark. A person holds a warm bowl between their hands. There is no need for dramatic conversation. The simplicity of the environment is enough. This quiet scene could exist within the same society that produced armored warriors and fortified castles. The ability to hold these different worlds together is one of the most interesting features of samurai-era Japan. Military traditions existed alongside literature, religion, craftsmanship, theater, gardens, and tea. Political hierarchy existed alongside commercial activity. Castles contained both defensive architecture and aesthetic spaces. The sword and the brush could occupy the same household. The warrior and the scholar could be the same person. This does not mean every samurai practiced every cultural tradition. Historical people were individuals, and their interests varied enormously. Some were deeply involved in literature. Others cared more about practical administration. Some were skilled warriors. Others were poor and struggled with financial problems. Some households were wealthy and influential, while others faced serious limitations. The word samurai covers many different lives across many centuries, and those lives cannot be reduced to one personality or lifestyle. The family was another major part of this variation. A samurai household could include several generations, depending on circumstances. Children were raised within a system that emphasized family continuity and social responsibility. Marriage could connect families and strengthen relationships. Older relatives could play important roles in household decisions. Women managed many aspects of domestic life and could be responsible for correspondence, finances, education, and family relationships, although expectations differed by status and period. The household was therefore a complex institution rather than simply the private home of a warrior. At night, the formal structure of the household became less visible. Family members might eat together, discuss practical matters, prepare clothing for the next day, or simply rest. A child might be sent to sleep in another room. An older family member might remain awake reading. Someone might prepare the final tea before the household settled down. These ordinary interactions were unlikely to appear in official records, but they formed the majority of personal life. The absence of records does not mean these moments were unimportant. It simply means history preserves some kinds of information better than others. Political documents survive because governments needed them. Property records survive because ownership required evidence. Letters survive when families preserved them. Objects survive when they were valuable enough to keep. But ordinary conversations, meals, jokes, worries, and moments of silence usually disappeared with the people who experienced them. This is why the physical landscape becomes so important. A worn threshold can tell us that people entered repeatedly. A polished wooden floor shows where feet moved. A garden path reveals the routes people took. A repaired wall shows that maintenance was necessary. A kitchen hearth reveals where meals were prepared. A well shows where water was collected. These physical traces allow us to understand daily life even when personal stories are missing. The castle town at night is therefore a landscape of traces. The roads are dark, but they have been shaped by generations of movement. The buildings are quiet, but their walls have heard countless conversations. The gardens are empty, but their paths have been walked by families for decades. The river is invisible, but its sound continues beneath the bridge. The castle appears silent, but its rooms contain the memory of thousands of activities. As the evening deepens, the town becomes quieter still. Shop doors are closed. Kitchen fires are reduced. Lanterns become the main source of light. The castle gates are secured. The roads empty except for occasional travelers or guards. Inside the houses, bedding is brought out. Rooms become sleeping spaces again. The same architecture that supported the busy day now creates a protected environment for rest. The mountains disappear completely into darkness. The river remains only as a sound. The castle towers become silhouettes. A few lanterns glow along the walls. The rain begins again, lightly at first, touching the roof tiles and garden leaves. Soon the sound becomes steady enough to blend with the river. Another day is ending. Nothing extraordinary has happened. And that is exactly what makes the moment so valuable. Because this was the world most people experienced most of the time. Not a famous battle, not a dramatic political crisis, but a gradual movement from morning work to evening rest, surrounded by rain, wood, water, family, and the quiet repetition of ordinary life. As the night settles over the castle town once again, the rain becomes the dominant sound of the landscape. The streets have emptied, the workshops are dark, and the houses have closed themselves against the weather. Beneath the roofs, families have finished their evening meals and begun preparing for sleep. The castle has become quieter as well, although it is never completely empty. Guards remain at important entrances. Fires continue to glow in kitchens and other working spaces, and a few officials may still be awake completing tasks that could not wait until morning. Yet most of the town has entered the private part of the day, the hours when public responsibilities become less visible and the simple routines of home take over. It is during these hours that the image of the samurai becomes especially human. The sword may be nearby, The household may belong to a warrior family, and the castle may represent military authority, but the person inside still needs to sleep, eat, rest, and recover from the demands of the day. The dramatic world associated with the samurai exists around them, but for a few quiet hours, it becomes almost irrelevant. A samurai household could contain a surprisingly large amount of activity that had nothing directly to do with warfare. Children needed to be educated, clothing had to be maintained, food needed to be prepared, letters had to be written, guests had to be received, household finances had to be managed, and relationships with relatives and political superiors had to be maintained. A family's social position could depend upon careful behavior and the preservation of reputation. Marriage arrangements, inheritance, and family continuity were important concerns. The household was not simply a private space. It was connected to the wider political and social structure. A decision made inside a family could affect relationships with other families, while a political change outside the house could alter the family's future. The private and public worlds therefore constantly influenced each other, even when the household seemed peaceful. Family continuity was particularly important in a society where status and property could be inherited. A samurai family did not think only about the present generation. The future of the household mattered. Children were raised with expectations about their eventual responsibilities. A son might be prepared to inherit a position or household duties, while daughters could be connected to other families through marriage. The actual arrangements varied enormously depending on period, region, wealth, and individual circumstances, but the general importance of family continuity remained strong. A household could survive political changes if it successfully adapted and maintained its relationships. It could also decline if it lost income, status, or political support. Behind the impressive image of a castle town was therefore a constant concern with continuity. The quietness of the night provides an opportunity to think about this passage of generations. A child sleeping in a samurai residence might one day become an adult responsible for the same household. The garden outside might still exist when that happened, although the trees would be larger and some plants would have changed. The wooden structure might be repaired. The same road might still lead toward the castle. The river would almost certainly continue flowing. The child could therefore grow up inside a landscape that seemed permanent, even though the people within it were constantly changing. This experience of continuity was probably powerful. The physical environment gave a sense of stability while human lives moved through it. The garden was one of the places where this contrast between permanence and change could be seen most clearly. A carefully arranged garden could remain recognizable for decades, yet every season transformed it. Spring brought flowers and new leaves. Summer created dense green shade. Autumn filled paths with fallen leaves. Winter exposed branches and sometimes covered stones with snow. Rain changed the appearance of the garden from hour to hour. A person who knew the garden intimately could notice small differences that a visitor would never see. A branch might have grown slightly. Moss might have spread across a stone. A path might have become more worn. The pond might contain more leaves than before. These changes were small, but together they created a living landscape. The Japanese appreciation of seasonal change was not limited to gardens. Clothing, food, poetry, festivals, decorations, and household objects could all reflect the season. The same residence could feel completely different in spring and winter. Summer encouraged open spaces and airflow, while winter required more attention to warmth. Rainy seasons brought their own rhythms. Seasonal awareness made time visible. Instead of thinking only in terms of dates and numbers, people could understand the year through flowers, weather, harvests, insects, birds, and changes in the landscape. For a samurai, this seasonal awareness existed alongside formal obligations. A government official might spend the morning reviewing documents and the evening appreciating a garden. A warrior might practice martial skills and later participate in a tea gathering. A family might discuss financial concerns while also observing a festival. Human life rarely fits into a single category. The same person could be practical, ambitious, religious, artistic, tired, humorous, serious, and affectionate at different moments. Historical labels such as samurai describe a social position, but they do not describe an entire personality. This is important because popular images often turn historical groups into characters rather than people. The samurai is presented as permanently disciplined, permanently serious, and permanently prepared for death. The reality was undoubtedly more varied. People laughed, they complained, they became bored, they worried about money, they argued with relatives. They enjoyed food, they became attached to animals, they admired beautiful landscapes, they made mistakes, they became ill, they grew old. They experienced the same basic range of human emotions that people experience today, even though the surrounding culture was very different. The ordinary night allows us to remember this. Imagine the castle town when almost everyone is asleep. There is no heroic pose. No one is standing dramatically beneath a moonlit gate. Most people are lying down. Someone may be dreaming. Someone may be uncomfortable because of the weather. Someone may be thinking about tomorrow. Someone may have fallen asleep immediately after a long day. The guards are perhaps the only people whose role requires them to remain visibly active. Everyone else is simply resting. This makes the pre-dawn hours a kind of equalizer. Social differences still exist, but sleep itself is universal. The Lord needs rest. The samurai needs rest. The servant needs rest. The craftsman needs rest. The farmer needs rest. The traveler needs rest. The body imposes its own rhythm regardless of social position. The great castle may symbolize power, but inside it people still experience fatigue. The countryside beyond the castle is also sleeping. Farmers' homes are dark. Tools have been put away. Fields are silent. The irrigation channels continue moving water. Forests stand beneath the night sky. Animals remain active in their own ways. The river carries water through the darkness. The relationship between town and countryside does not disappear simply because people are asleep. It continues through the landscape. At dawn, farmers will begin returning to their fields. The castle will begin receiving information from surrounding villages. Markets will reopen. Food will move toward the town. The administrative system will begin another day. This continuous connection between the castle and countryside was essential. A domain was not just the territory controlled by a lord. It was a network of communities whose labor, resources, and relationships made political authority possible. The samurai administration therefore required knowledge of the land. Officials needed to understand agricultural production, roads, rivers, villages, and local conditions. They had to respond to floods, harvest failures, disputes, and other problems. The peaceful image of the castle could hide a great deal of administrative complexity. A lord might be surrounded by formal ceremonies, but beneath those ceremonies was a system of records and practical decisions. This administrative culture also contributed to the development of education. Reading and writing were valuable because government depended upon documents. Schools and private educational institutions became increasingly important during the Edo period. Samurai children were expected to develop skills appropriate to their social position, and education could extend beyond purely military subjects. Classical texts, moral teachings, history, mathematics, and calligraphy all had practical and cultural value. A young samurai could therefore spend years learning how to handle a brush before ever having serious military responsibilities. The brush itself provides an interesting contrast to the sword. Both require controlled movement, but their purposes are completely different. One creates written communication, the other represents martial power. Yet both could become symbols of discipline. The brush could reveal the personality and training of its user through handwriting. The sword could reveal craftsmanship and status through its blade and fittings. In a traditional household, the two worlds could exist side by side. The same is true of religion and martial culture. Samurai families could maintain relationships with Buddhist temples while also participating in Shinto practices and local festivals. Religious institutions provided spaces for prayer, memorials, education, and community activity. The spiritual world was not necessarily separate from daily life. A person might visit a temple, maintain an ancestral memorial, participate in a shrine festival, and then return home to administrative work. These different aspects of identity could coexist. The night around a temple would have its own atmosphere. The buildings would be dark except for occasional lights. Trees would form dense silhouettes. Stone paths would be wet. The temple bell would remain silent for long periods. If rain fell, it would collect on roof tiles and flow toward the ground. The place might seem completely empty, yet the temple itself represented generations of religious activity. People had entered through the same gates, walked the same paths, and left offerings across many years. The same continuity existed at shrines. Sacred trees could become landmarks for generations. Stone markers could remain in place long after the people who placed them had disappeared. A path could connect a settlement to a shrine for centuries. These places created a sense of memory that extended beyond individual families. This long memory is one of the most interesting aspects of Japanese historical landscapes. A person living several centuries ago could have walked beneath trees that still exist today, crossed rivers that still flow, or stood beside stones that remain in place. Of course, landscapes change, and modern development has transformed many places, but the natural features provide a remarkable degree of continuity. Mountains are especially powerful in this regard. Political boundaries can disappear, but mountains remain. A mountain visible from a castle could have been part of the local landscape for thousands of years. Generations of samurai may have seen it from the same direction. Farmers may have used it as a landmark. Travelers may have judged distances by it. Artists may have painted it. Poets may have written about it. Religious traditions may have associated it with sacred meaning. The mountain, therefore, became more than geography. It became part of collective memory. The river had a similar role. Every generation experienced its changing water levels, seasonal behavior, floods, and calm periods. Children learned to swim or fish in certain places. Farmers depended upon its water. Travelers crossed it. Bridges were rebuilt after damage. Boats carried goods where navigation allowed. The river connected communities while also separating them. It could be a road made of water and a boundary at the same time. At night, however, the river loses most of these visible meanings. It becomes sound. A person inside a dark house might hear it without seeing it. The sound does not explain itself. It simply continues. This makes the river an ideal symbol for the passage of time. People come and go, but the water keeps moving. The castle may change owners, but the river continues beneath it. A child becomes an adult becomes an elder, and the river remains. Eventually, even the castle itself changes. Wooden buildings require repair. Fires can destroy structures. Earthquakes can damage walls. Political transformations can change the purpose of buildings. A residence may become an administrative office. A fortress may lose its military function. A domain may disappear. A new government may take control. The physical landscape can survive while its meaning changes. This happened across Japan, as the country moved from the feudal systems of earlier centuries toward the modern state of the 19th century. The samurai class eventually lost its formal privileges and legal status. Castles were dismantled, repurposed, abandoned, or preserved. Some structures survived, while others disappeared completely. The world that had seemed permanent to earlier generations was transformed within a relatively short historical period. Yet the end of the samurai did not mean the end of everything associated with their culture. Crafts survived. Gardens survived. Architecture influenced later buildings. Literature continued to be studied. Martial traditions evolved into modern forms. Historical memory preserved famous figures and events. Some castles were reconstructed or maintained as cultural landmarks. The landscape became a bridge between the old world and the new. When we visit a historic castle today, we therefore stand in a place that has experienced several different identities. It may once have been a military center, then an administrative site, later a ruined structure, and eventually a preserved historical landmark. Each generation looked at it differently. The same stones could mean defense to one generation, memory to another, and tourism to another. The rain, however, does not care which meaning the castle has. It falls on the roof, it gathers on the stones, it runs toward the river carries it away. This simple movement continues regardless of political history. Perhaps this is why water works so well as a sound for sleep documentaries about the past. It provides continuity without demanding attention. The river does not tell us what to think, it simply flows. Rain does not explain history. It creates an atmosphere in which history can be imagined quietly. The sound of water allows the mind to move slowly through time. And so, as the castle town enters another night, the details begin to fade. The last lights become smaller, the streets empty, the roofs shine beneath the rain, the mountains disappear behind clouds. Inside the residences, people settle beneath their bedding. The guards remain awake. The river continues beyond the walls. The famous samurai world is still there, but it has become almost invisible. Perhaps that is appropriate, because the real hidden life of the samurai was not always found in the moments that history shouted about. It was found in the quiet hours when nothing dramatic happened. It was found in the kitchen before breakfast, the writing room after sunset, the garden after rain, the road before sunrise, and the bedroom where someone finally closed their eyes after a long day. The night continues, the rain falls, and the castle waits for morning. The rain continues through the deepest part of the night, and the castle town gradually disappears beneath darkness once again. The roofs are black against the sky, the gardens are almost invisible, and the roads that were busy only hours earlier have become quiet paths reflecting the faint glow of occasional lanterns. Inside the castle, most rooms have fallen silent. The administrative offices are closed, documents have been put away, and the people who spent the day moving through corridors and courtyards have returned to their residences. Only a few lights remain. A guard walks beneath a covered passage, listening to the rain and watching the entrance ahead. Somewhere in another building, a small charcoal fire continues to glow. Beyond the walls, the river moves steadily through the valley, carrying the night's rain downstream. It is difficult to imagine that this apparently peaceful landscape once formed part of a world defined by warriors, political struggles, inherited status, fortified residences, and military traditions. Yet the peacefulness is not a contradiction. It is part of the story. The samurai world was not constantly at war, and the majority of its people did not spend every evening preparing for battle. The long periods between conflicts were filled with ordinary routines, and those routines gradually became the real substance of life. When we look back at the samurai from the modern world, it is tempting to compress centuries of history into a single image. We imagine the warrior with a sword, the castle on the hill, the armor, the banners, the dramatic confrontation, and the code of honor. Those images are powerful, but they represent only a fraction of the historical experience. The samurai existed for many centuries, and their role changed enormously across that time. Early warriors operated within political and military systems very different from those of the later Edo period. During the long peace established under the Tokugawa shogunate, many samurai became administrators, teachers, clerks, scholars, and local officials. Their social identity remained connected to the warrior class, but their everyday responsibilities could be surprisingly peaceful. A man who belonged to a samurai family might spend the morning reviewing records, the afternoon visiting an official, the evening studying literature, and the night listening to rain against a wooden roof. His sword might remain nearby, but it could go unused for most of his life. The existence of the weapon did not mean that violence was happening constantly. Sometimes it represented status, inherited identity, and the possibility of military service more than immediate action. This long period of peace also transformed the towns around castles. A castle could become less important as a battlefield and more important as the administrative heart of a domain. Roads became increasingly organized. Markets expanded. Merchants and craftsmen developed specialized businesses. Schools and cultural institutions appeared. Temples and shrines remained important centers of religious and community life. The town became a complex urban environment in which different social groups depended upon one another. The samurai residents could stand near the homes of craftsmen and merchants, while the surrounding countryside supplied food and materials. The castle, therefore, existed at the center of an economic and social network that reached far beyond its walls. A person looking from a castle tower toward the surrounding landscape might see fields, forests, roads, villages, and rivers, but beneath that visual landscape was an enormous system of labor. Every field represented cultivation. Every road represented construction and maintenance. Every bridge represented engineering and repeated repair. Every roof represented skilled craftsmanship. Every meal connected the household to farmers, traders, transport workers, cooks, and countless others. The hidden labor behind the samurai world becomes especially clear when we think about the castle itself. Large wooden structures require continuous maintenance. Rain can damage timber. Humidity can affect materials. Roof tiles break. Paper screens tear. Floors become worn. Gardens become overgrown. Drainage channels become blocked. Wooden gates require repair. Fires must be managed carefully. Storage rooms need inspection. Food must be protected from spoilage. Horses require feeding and grooming. Weapons need maintenance. Clothing needs washing and repair. None of these tasks are dramatic, but without them, the castle would gradually stop functioning. The impressive appearance of a historic castle today can therefore be misleading. A well-maintained castle looks permanent, but its survival always depended upon people who noticed small problems and solved them before they became large ones. The beauty of the building was the visible result of thousands of invisible acts of care. The same principle existed inside ordinary households. A family residence did not remain clean, warm, organized, and comfortable without work. Someone swept the floors. Someone prepared food. Someone carried water. Someone cleaned cooking vessels. Someone repaired clothing. Someone maintained the garden. Someone cared for animals. Someone collected fuel. Someone arranged bedding. Someone managed household supplies. In larger families, these responsibilities could be divided among several people, while poorer households had to perform many tasks themselves. The distinction between warrior and worker, therefore, becomes less clear when we look closely at daily life. Everyone depended upon work. Even the highest-ranking lord relied upon people performing tasks that were rarely considered prestigious. The kitchen is perhaps the perfect symbol of this hidden reality. A castle may represent political power, but every political system eventually depends upon food. Rice must be cultivated, vegetables must be grown, fish must be caught, salt and other supplies must be transporting, firewood or charcoal must be obtained, water must be carried. Food must be prepared and served. The simple meal placed before a samurai, therefore, represents a long chain of human effort. The meal may be quiet and formal, but behind it lies agriculture, trade, transportation, storage, cooking, and household organization. The same is true of almost everything inside the residence. A piece of clothing connects the household to textile workers. A ceramic bowl connects it to potters and traders. A wooden chest connects it to forests and carpenters. A sword connects it to miners, smiths, polishers, woodworkers, and specialists in decorative fittings. This interconnectedness reminds us that the samurai were never completely separate from the people around them. Their social position was distinct, and the hierarchy of the time could be strict, but daily life created dependence across social boundaries. The warrior needed the farmer needed tools. The craftsman needed materials, the merchant needed customers, the castle needed workers. The entire system functioned because each part supported another. A peaceful castle town was therefore not simply a collection of warriors and their servants. It was a community with many different occupations and experiences. The countryside was especially important. From the castle, the fields might appear calm and almost decorative, particularly after rain when the water reflects the sky. But agriculture was demanding work. Rice fields required careful preparation, planting, irrigation, weeding, harvesting, threshing, storage, and transport. Water had to be controlled. Embankments needed maintenance. Flooding could destroy crops. Drought could create shortages. Pests and disease could affect harvests. The success of the domain depended heavily upon agricultural production. The samurai administrative system therefore had to pay attention to villages, fields, taxes, and local conditions. Political power rested ultimately upon resources produced by the land. The river running through the valley was part of this system. It supplied water and sometimes transportation, but it could also become dangerous. After heavy rain, its level could rise rapidly. Bridges might become difficult to cross. Low-lying fields could flood. Villages near the banks had to understand the river's behavior. Generations of local knowledge accumulated around such landscapes. People knew which areas were safe, which roads became muddy, where water rose first, and which crossings could be trusted. The river was not simply a scenic feature. It was a living part of the community's economy and survival. And yet at night, the river becomes almost invisible. From inside a dark residence, a person may hear it without seeing it. This is one of the most beautiful ways to imagine the hidden world of the samurai. Much of the surrounding landscape disappears after sunset, but sound remains. The river continues. Rain falls. Wind moves through trees. A distant bell marks time. A horse shifts inside its stable. A wooden door closes somewhere along the street. The darkness does not eliminate the world. It simply changes how the world is experienced. Hearing becomes more important because vision has been reduced. A person can know that the river is there without seeing its surface. They can know that trees are moving without seeing their branches. They can know that rain continues without looking outside. For people living without modern lighting, nighttime must have felt physically larger than it does today. Artificial light creates an enormous visual environment after sunset, allowing modern cities to remain active long after natural darkness. In the samurai period, the area illuminated by a lamp was small. Beyond that circle of light, the world remained uncertain. A garden might disappear only a few steps beyond a veranda. A road could become difficult to navigate. The mountains vanished entirely. This did not necessarily make the night frightening. Familiarity could create comfort. People knew their homes, their roads, their gardens, and their surroundings. But the night was certainly different from the day, and the darkness encouraged a slower rhythm. The sleeping room was therefore an important part of the household. Bedding could be brought out after the day's activities were finished. The room became simple and quiet. A small lamp might remain lit for a while. The garden outside became a dark outline. Rain provided a steady sound against the roof. There were no screens glowing in the corner, no messages arriving, and no artificial stream of information demanding attention. A person could lie awake and simply listen. They might think about the next day, remember something that happened earlier, or simply wait for sleep. The mind was still capable of worry and distraction, of course, but the external environment offered far fewer sources of constant stimulation. The experience of time was different as well. Without clocks on every device, people relied more heavily on natural signs, bells, routines, and established schedules. Daylight indicated when many activities should begin and end. Seasonal changes affected work. Temple bells could mark important hours. Household routines created a sense of structure. Time existed, but it was experienced through the environment as much as through precise measurement. The arrival of dawn mattered because it changed what could be done. Sunset mattered because it changed the practical possibilities of movement and work. This connection to natural time is particularly visible in agriculture. Farmers could not ignore the seasons. The land determined much of the calendar. Planting and harvesting had to occur within appropriate periods. Weather could change plans. Festivals and religious observances often followed seasonal patterns. The landscape itself became a calendar. A flower appearing, a tree changing color, a bird arriving, or a river changing level could indicate that the year was moving forward. The samurai household, despite its administrative responsibilities, existed within this same environment. This awareness of seasons also influenced art and culture. Japanese poetry often paid attention to small natural details, while gardens were designed to create changing experiences throughout the year. Tea culture incorporated seasonal objects and flowers. Clothing changed according to weather and social occasion. Food reflected what was available. The idea of impermanence became an important theme in Buddhist thought and broader Japanese aesthetics. Beauty could be found precisely because it was temporary. Blossoms fell. Leaves changed. Snow melted. Rain stopped. A garden looked different tomorrow. The samurai participated in this cultural environment even though they were associated primarily with warfare. Some became patrons of artists, some practiced calligraphy, some studied poetry, some participated in tea gatherings, some collected books and artworks. Others had little interest in these things. Again, there was no single samurai personality. The class contained ambitious officials, poor warriors, scholars, administrators, craftsmen connected to warrior households, young students, elderly family heads, and many people whose lives cannot be reduced to a stereotype. This variety is especially important when thinking about honor. Modern stories often present samurai honor as a simple and universal code that dictated every action. Historical reality was more complicated. Concepts of loyalty, duty, reputation, family responsibility, status, and moral behavior certainly mattered, but people interpreted and balanced these expectations in different ways. A samurai could feel loyalty toward a lord while also worrying about his family's finances. A person could be courageous in one situation and frightened in another. Someone could follow tradition carefully while adapting to new circumstances. Human beings rarely fit perfectly into ideals. The same complexity existed in family relationships. A household could be a place of affection and support, but it could also contain disagreements, financial pressure, expectations, and difficult decisions. Children were raised within a system that placed responsibilities upon them. Marriage could involve family considerations beyond personal preference. Inheritance could determine the future of a household. Older relatives could influence important decisions. Women played essential roles in maintaining households and family relationships, although their opportunities and restrictions differed according to social position and period. The samurai household was therefore a social institution as much as a private home. At night, however, many of these formal responsibilities became quieter. A father could simply be sitting with a child. A mother could be preparing clothing for the next morning. An elderly relative could be resting. A young person could be studying by lamplight. The household could temporarily become a small group of human beings rather than a political unit. These moments rarely entered official records, but they were probably some of the most meaningful parts of individual lives. The same is true of friendship. Samurai could form relationships through schools, military training, official work, travel, and cultural activities. A friend might visit in the evening. Letters could connect people separated by distance. A shared meal or tea gathering could strengthen relationships. The emotional lives of historical people remain difficult to reconstruct. But there is no reason to imagine them as emotionally distant simply because they lived centuries ago. They formed attachments, experienced loss, trusted some people more than others, and remembered those who had died. Death itself was a constant presence. Medical knowledge was limited compared with modern standards, and illness could be serious. Families experienced the loss of children, parents, spouses, and friends. Buddhist temples often played important roles in memorial practices. Ancestors could remain part of household identity through memorial objects and rituals. Cemeteries and temple grounds connected the living with the memory of earlier generations. This awareness of mortality could coexist with the appreciation of everyday beauty. A rainy garden was beautiful partly because it would not remain exactly the same. Perhaps this is why the quiet world of the samurai feels so appropriate for a nighttime story. The night naturally encourages attention to things that are temporary and easily overlooked. The sound of rain is temporary. A lantern burns only for a while. A person sleeps and eventually wakes. Seasons change. Buildings age. Political systems disappear. Yet while each moment is temporary, the rhythm continues. The samurai world itself eventually came to an end. The 19th century brought enormous political and social changes to Japan. The Tokugawa system collapsed. The country entered a new period of modernization, and the formal privileges of the samurai class were removed. Castles lost many of their old functions. Some were dismantled, some burned, some abandoned, and others eventually preserved. The social system that had existed for centuries could not simply remain unchanged in the face of modern nation building, new military technologies, economic transformation, and changing ideas about citizenship and government. For the people who lived through that transition, the changes were not abstract. They affected clothing, employment, military service, taxation, education, travel, and family status. A person whose identity had been tied to the samurai class could suddenly find that the old social structure no longer existed. Some adapted successfully, others struggled. Some entered new government institutions or military organizations. Others became teachers, businessmen, farmers, or members of different professions. The end of the samurai was therefore not a single dramatic moment, but a complicated process experienced differently by thousands of people. Yet the landscapes remained. The rivers still flowed. The mountains remained on the horizon. Old roads continue to exist in altered forms. Temples and shrines survived. Gardens were maintained. Crafts continued through new generations. Memories were preserved in families, books, museums, photographs, and stories. The samurai became history, but history did not erase the places where they had lived. Today, an old Japanese castle can feel almost impossibly quiet compared with the world that once surrounded it. Visitors may walk across polished floors, look through reconstructed rooms, and admire gardens without hearing the sounds that once filled them. There may be signs explaining battles and political events, but the ordinary sounds of daily life are gone. No one is preparing the original meals. No guard is standing at the gate in the old uniform. No messenger is arriving with a letter. No child is running through the residence. The building remains, but the life has moved on. This is why imagination can be useful when approached carefully. We do not need to invent fictional adventures to make the past interesting. We can simply imagine the ordinary conditions that historical evidence supports. A wet garden, a charcoal fire, a wooden corridor, a quiet kitchen, a river after rain, a road before dawn, a family sleeping beneath a roof, a guard listening to the darkness. These details do not require a dramatic story. They create an atmosphere in which the past becomes easier to understand. And perhaps the most important thing to remember is that the people living in that world did not know they were living in history. They did not know which castles would survive. They did not know which battles would become famous. They did not know which samurai would later become legends. They did not know that centuries later people would study their clothing, architecture, letters, weapons, gardens, and political institutions. To them, their lives were simply the present. A farmer did not wake thinking, "I am participating in Japanese agricultural history." He woke because the day had begun. A craftsman did not open his workshop thinking, "This technique will be studied centuries from now." He opened it because there was work to do. A samurai official did not write a document knowing that someone might someday analyze his handwriting. He wrote because the administration required it. A child did not walk through the garden thinking about historical memory. The child simply walked through the garden. This ordinary perspective is perhaps the closest we can come to understanding the hidden life of the samurai. They were not characters inside a story. They were people living before the story had been written, and their world was full of ordinary moments. The rain falling against the roof, the smell of rice cooking in the kitchen, the warmth of charcoal, the sound of a wooden door sliding open, the coolness of stone beneath wet feet, the distant river, the mountain disappearing behind clouds, the garden changing with the seasons. The quiet of a room after the lamp was extinguished, the first bird calling before sunrise. These experiences formed the texture of life. The famous battles were only brief interruptions in a much longer rhythm. As the night reaches its deepest point, the rain becomes lighter. The sound on the roof softens until it is almost indistinguishable from the river. Most of the castle town is completely dark now. The guards continue their watch. The final kitchen fire glows faintly. Inside the houses, families sleep. The mountains are hidden. The fields are invisible. Everything seems still, but the river continues moving. Then, slowly, the darkness begins to change. At first, there is almost no difference. Then the sky above the mountains becomes slightly lighter. The outlines of the trees begin to return. The castle roofs emerge from the shadows. Wet tiles reflect the first grey light. Mist gathers above the water. A bird calls from somewhere beyond the garden. Another answers. The night is ending. Inside the residence, someone wakes. Perhaps they are a servant preparing the kitchen. Perhaps a guard is finishing the final hours of the night. Perhaps a family member has simply woken naturally. A fire is prepared. Water is heated. A door opens. The castle begins another day. This moment may look almost identical to the beginning of the story. because the great rhythm of the samurai world was repetition. One day followed another. One season followed another. One generation followed another. The same tasks returned again and again, while individual people gradually disappeared. That repetition created continuity. The castle could survive because someone repaired it. The family could continue because children were raised. The fields could produce because farmers returned each season. The roads remained useful because people maintained them. The gardens remained beautiful because someone cared for them. The political system continued because officials performed their duties. The culture survived because teachers passed knowledge to students. The crafts survived because masters taught apprentices. Everything depended upon transmission. Knowledge moved from one generation to another. A carpenter taught another carpenter. A swordsmith trained an apprentice. A gardener taught someone how to care for a tree. A parent taught a child. A teacher taught a student. A temple preserved a tradition. A household preserved an object. This was how the samurai world endured for centuries, not because nothing changed, but because enough knowledge and practice were passed forward to maintain continuity. Eventually, however, change became too great for the old system to remain. The samurai class disappeared as a formal social category, but the accumulated knowledge did not vanish completely. Some traditions adapted to the modern world. Some crafts survived. Some buildings were preserved. Some gardens remained. Some martial practices became modern disciplines. Historical scholarship reconstructed the past from documents and objects. The world changed, but memory carried pieces of the old world forward. The river, meanwhile, continued. It had no political allegiance. It belonged to no lord. It did not care which family controlled the castle. It simply moved. Perhaps that is the most peaceful image with which to end our journey. The samurai world was temporary, like every human institution. Castles rise and fall. Political systems appear and disappear. Families flourish and decline. Warriors become administrators. Administrators become ordinary citizens, and eventually their descendants live in a completely different society. But the natural world continues around them. Rain falls on the same mountains. Water moves through the same valleys. Trees grow beside the same rivers. Morning arrives after every night. The physical world does not preserve every story, but it provides the setting in which those stories happened. And so, as the first sunlight reaches the castle walls, the hidden world before dawn slowly disappears. The wet garden becomes visible. The river shines beneath the bridge. The roofs turn from black to grey and then to warm colour. Smoke rises from the first kitchen fires. The town begins moving again. The roads fill gradually. Farmers return to the fields. Craftsmen prepare their tools. Merchants open their shops. Officials enter the castle. Children wake inside their homes. Another ordinary day has begun. The samurai who lived here would have experienced thousands of mornings, but none of them would have known which one would be remembered. Most were simply days. Some were difficult. Some were joyful. Some were tiring. Some were peaceful. Some brought unexpected news. Some brought rain. Some brought clear skies. Some brought changes that would affect an entire family. Most passed quietly. And that is the hidden life we have been following. Not the samurai of legends alone, but the samurai of ordinary mornings. The person who wakes before dawn, the person who listens to rain, the person who waits for the fire to warm, the person who prepares for work, the person who walks through a garden, the person who reads a letter, the person who eats a simple meal, the person who returns home at evening, the person who hears the river at night, the person who finally closes their eyes. Behind every historical figure was a human life like this. Behind every castle was a community. Behind every sword was a network of craftsmen. Behind every meal was a landscape of farmers and roads. Behind every political decision was an enormous system of ordinary labor. Behind every famous battle were years of peace. And behind every great chapter of history were countless nights when almost nothing happened. Those nights matter. Because history is not only made by moments of crisis, it is also made by repetition, patience, maintenance, education, family, work, and time. The quiet world of the samurai was built from these things. The final drops of rain fall from the cedar branches. The garden stones shine beneath the morning light. The river continues beneath the bridge, carrying the night's water toward the distant sea. The castle stands above the town, no longer hidden by darkness. Its walls have witnessed generations of people coming and going, but the morning is always new. The people who once lived there are gone. Their voices are gone. Their footsteps are gone. Their private thoughts are gone. But the landscape remains. And if we listen carefully, beneath the modern world and the distance of centuries, we can still imagine the quiet sound of water, the soft movement of rain against a wooden roof, the faint glow of a lantern before dawn, and the slow awakening of a castle town. The samurai world has become history, but before it became history, it was simply life. And before each day became a memory, there was always a quiet moment before dawn when the world was still sleeping. The river was flowing, the rain was falling, and another morning had not yet begun.